Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago in the Interior Architecture Department. Alright, well it's Tuesday, I should say. It's 2/22/22, so February 22nd, 2022. So it's kind of an interesting day. I'm here in Chicago. It's a rainy day. It's kind of end of winter. Maybe fall is poking its head, or not fall, but spring is poking its head out. So I'm looking forward to spring. Shout out to all my students. I hope you're doing well and the semester is going good. We're going to be approaching midterm of a spring semester here, so looking forward to midterm and seeing all the students' good work. And I will post their good work on Instagram. So today we are looking at Vray for SketchUp lighting. And you can see in this image I have some recessed can lights. We have the sun coming in. We have a light above the soffit. We have a light lighting this wall on the right. We have another light bringing in some artificial light from the outside. We have this glowing box, which is an emissive material. And we have a spotlight that's shining on this Corbusier lounge. So we'll look at how to do all that good stuff in a moment. But speaking of Instagram and YouTube, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, click on the subscribe button, click on the bell to receive all the notifications. I just reached 10,000 subscribers, so I'm pretty excited about that. How quick can I get to 20,000? I don't know, it's going to take a little while, but every little bit helps, so help me out and subscribe to the channel. I mentioned Instagram, so this is where I'm posting my students' excellent work and what I'm up to at school and at both schools, so you can check that out. So connect with me on Instagram. I recently reached 2,000 followers, so looking to get some more followers as well. All right, so let's get into this SketchUp tutorial. Close some of this stuff down and save this file and open up a new one. So if you haven't looked at my V-Ray SketchUp Basics video, I would go back to that video and check that out. That's where I'm starting with this model here that you can see. So I have this little model. If I zoom out, I have this little model here that we made in the V-Ray for SketchUp Basics video. So if you want to make that model, go ahead and go back to that video. Alright, so lighting. Let's start out here talking about a couple things. One is the sun. So the sun is really important when you're making renderings, especially interior renderings. You want to bring some sun into the scene to begin with. So typically there's some sort of window where you can bring in this natural daylight. And we're going to have that here coming in through this window. So let's just take a look at that to begin with. So I'm going to bring up the V-Ray window. Take a second to open up. Okay, and I'm going to go to lights. And you see I have sunlight. And I have set my custom orientation. I have this button turned on. And I'm just going to remember my previous settings. So my horizontal angle is 265.7 because I really like this light, and the vertical angle is 22.7. So I can always type those values in. But let's bring up the interactive render. So that's the teapot with the hand, and let's minimize this window. Okay, so there's our teapot with the hand, and we have our sunlight coming in through this window here. So if I want the sunlight to come in less, like not as far into the space, that means I would have to raise its altitude or its vertical angle. So I'm raising its vertical angle. So I'm at 46 degrees right now. You can see that here. So if I set that to 45, I'm at a 45-degree angle. Then I can also set its position from 0 to 365. So if we go this way, if I go to the Y, that's going to be 0. Type in 0 there. And you can see where the light is coming in at 0. It's coming in straight in. So if I want it to come in this lower right, I'm going to put it somewhere about here to come in through this glass. Okay, so now that's coming in through that glass, and I can say I want it to come into the space less, so maybe, around 60 degrees. Okay, the other setting for sunlight is its intensity. By default, the intensity is set to 1, or you can think of it as 100%. So if I want to lower that intensity, say I put 0.25, which is 25%, it's going to be a lot less lighter in that scene. So a lot less light coming in at 0.25. So you just want to keep that in mind. If your scene is too bright from the sun, you can lower that down, say to 25%. If you want it really bright, I can put it at 2, which is 200%. And I get some really bright light coming in. Okay, I'm going to set that back to 1. So that's sunlight. Set that back to 1. And I'm going to put it back where I had it, which my horizontal angle was about 265, and my vertical angle was about 23. Okay, I'm getting the other thing that's happening with the sun is it's responding to the angle, that vertical angle. I'm at 23 degrees, so it's giving off a warmer hue, a browner light is coming in. When I set it to a higher angle, say like 70, the scene renders out more blue because it's higher in the sky. So I want a little bit of a warmer light, and I want it to come into the space a little bit further. So I'm going to set that to 23. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is the exposure value, which we'll talk about at the beginning here, but we'll also talk about at the end of this tutorial. So exposure value. That's the overall brightness, the general ambient light, I should say, in the scene. So if we go over to the gear, which is settings, and we go down to camera, there's an exposure value, and right now it's set to 12. So by default, it's around 14. So the higher the value, the darker it is. Okay, so you see it gets pretty dark just in a couple values from 12 to 14. And if I go to 10, it's going to get really bright. So you always want to adjust your exposure value, especially after you've placed your lights into your scene. You're going to have to change that exposure value and modify that. So let's set that back to 12. That's our exposure value. Okay, so I like to start out with a rectangle light and talk about a rectangle light. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to light this rear wall here with a rectangle light, and we can demonstrate how you can adjust the angles of light and how that light emits from the rectangle. So I'm going to stop the interactive render. I'm going to go ahead and save. It's such a good idea to save when you're rendering, because you never know what can happen. It can crash at any time. So you always want to save quite often. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this wall, which means I'm going to hide everything else. So I'm going to select that wall, and then I'm going to use Shift Control I on my keyboard. Those three buttons on the keyboard. Shift, Control, I. Those 3 keys. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Hide. Okay, so I have this one wall here that I'm going to work with. Okay, so I'm going to make a rectangle light. So this toolbar here, this is the V-Ray lights. So to get the V-Ray lights toolbar out, you would go to View, Toolbars, and make sure that V-Ray lights is checked on. Okay, so have that checked on. And this is the rectangle light. So I'm going to make this vertical, so I'm going to do my best to snap. I snap to the upper corner of that wall and it's making it vertical, and I'm going to snap to the lower right hand corner. Okay, I'm going to move it away from the wall. Okay, not too far, about there. But I need to rotate this 180. You see there's that big arrow and it's pointing to my left. I need it to point to my right and shine on that wall. So I'm going to use the rotate. The shortcut for rotate is Q. You can also select rotate from the main menu. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Just pick a starting point and rotate it 180 degrees. Let that snap. And I'm going to go ahead and move it. Shortcut for move is M. Alright. So I'd like to see this. I'd like to see this in a top view, just to see where it's at. So I'm going to go to Camera, Standard Views, Top. Okay. I'm going to shift it up a little bit. So somewhere about there, and then move it in closer, somewhere about there. Alright. So I'm saving all the time, Control S before I start to render. Go ahead and unhide our objects. So main menu, Edit, Unhide, and go over to All. And let's go into our scene by clicking on the Scene button, Camera 01. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. I'm going to dock this toolbar now that we've seen it. So I'm going to use my teapot with the hand. First, can I bring up my last rendering? Yes, I can click on what's called the frame buffer. It's a little icon that looks to me like a wall oven. I can click on that just to see my last rendering. So you see that wall is fairly dark, so we're going to go ahead and look at lighting up that object. I can click on the teapot with the hand from this toolbar. I can click on also the teapot here with the little green arrow for the interactive render. Alright, so a couple things you're going to notice here. One is you can see the physical light, and you can see that it's only shining in one direction. It's only shining to the right, but you can see that physical rectangle. So we can do a couple things. We can look at making it shine in both directions if that's something you need, and we can look at making that light invisible. So I'm going to open up the V-Ray window here by clicking on the Asset Editor button. And you see I now have a rectangle light. I'm going to rename this because I'm going to have a few rectangle lights. So I'm going to rename it. I like to keep the word rectangle in there so I know it's a rectangle light. I'm going to call this wall. Okay, now here under Options, I'm going to click on double-sided just so you see that. So that's a double-sided light now. It's shining in both directions. You see it adds quite a bit of light to the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and check or uncheck the double-sided, so it's just shining to the right. And I'm going to check on invisible. Okay, so that light goes away. Now my goal here is to light this wall so that the light is only shining on the wall, not on the ceiling and not on the floor. So I can do that by changing its directionality. So V-Ray gives you this nice little window here. So in this little window, the light is actually shining down on the floor. So we got to just imagine that that floor is our wall. And we don't want any light to shine on the sides of it, just on the floor itself, which is our wall. So I'm going to change the directionality of this. So it's just shining on here on that floor, and in my rendering just on the wall. To go a little more. And I'll probably have to just move my light a little bit closer as well. Now if I go all the way to 1, that's for sure just going to shine on the wall. And I can either, like I said, I can move it closer, I could leave this at 1. I'll leave it at 1 for now, and I'm going to lower its intensity. It's a little bit too bright. I want some fall off. I want the light to fall off on the wall. I don't want it super bright like this. So you could use this for, lighting a wall that you want to, highlight, or you could use it as, like, if you're making a projection, like you're going to project something on the wall, you could use this. So let's take the intensity down from 30. The intensity started at 30. We'll take that intensity down to 15. I'm going to go 15 is okay. I'm not getting the fall off that I want. The intensity of that is okay. It might be a little dark. So I am going to have to move that closer to the wall. So let's see if I can do that here. Select that. M for move. And move that in a little bit closer. Oh, I don't want it to get... We don't want that. Okay, let me look at adjusting another setting here. Instead of this thing at 1, I'm going to take it a little bit away from 1. There we go. Now we're getting some fall off. It's lighting our ceiling and our floor a little bit. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a soffit light. So I'm going to stop this interactive rendering. So a lot of times in interiors we have soffits. And then we have lighting above the soffits, and it lights our ceiling. So we're going to make a little soffit here, and then we're going to light the ceiling above it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And I'm going to select this wall again and Shift Control I, which inverts the selection. And then I'm going to go to Main Menu, Edit, Hide. Okay, and I'll orbit around with my middle wheel. I'll hold my Shift key to pan in the middle wheel. And I'm going to make a rectangle for my soffit. So I'm going to type in R for rectangle. I'm going to snap to this upper right back point. So I'm going to snap to that, and I'm going to make sure the rectangle is blue so that I know it's horizontal. So, and I'm just going to guesstimate the end of that rectangle. It can just be guesstimated. It doesn't have to be exact. Okay, and there's my rectangle. I'm going to push pull. I'm going to use P for the shortcut, and I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to pull it down 4 inches. So I'm just typing in 4 inches. And then I'm going to move it down off the ceiling so I can give some space above it for my light. So M for move, and I'm going to start to drag this down. Oh, so you see what's happening here because I haven't made it a component. So let's undo a couple of those moves, and we'll make a window selection of it. So with everything in SketchUp that you make, all the geometry that you make, you have to make sure that you make a component out of it, and the shortcut on the keyboard is G. And we're going to call this one Soffit. Okay, I'm going to move it back down now, or not back down, but move it down. There we go, now it's moving down. Keep it on axis. Okay, now I'm going to make a rectangle light, another rectangle light. So I'm going to click on the rectangle light, and I'm going to snap to a point, and there we go. It's being very nice to me right now. It's shining perfectly straight up. Okay. All right. Let's see what that's going to look like. So let's go to our camera view. And there you see the soffit. It's coming out into the room a little bit far. let's see if I can edit that so it's closer to the wall. So I'm gonna go ahead and isolate these two objects, the soffit and the wall. Go to main menu, edit, hide. Oh, sorry. I forgot to shift control I. So shift control I, and then main menu, edit, hide. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. So I'm going to take this component, double click on it, and I'm going to pull this in. If I can get that side face. There we go. Oh, just pull it in a little bit like so. Okay. And I'll close that component up. Trying to double click on its box. Okay. So you notice that my objects, they unhide when I go to my scene, because my scene was saved with all those objects unhidden, or I should say with all those objects showing. Alright, so let's see what this light looks like. Let's bring out the teapot with the hand. Alright, so we get this glowing light. And my rectangle light is too big right now because we made the soffit smaller. So you see that rectangle light sticking out beyond. So I'm going to take that, I'm just going to move it. Just going to try to move it over instead of making it smaller. Oh, right about there. And if I look at that in a top view, if I stop this rendering, so main menu, camera, standard views, top. I'm just going to drag this a little bit over. Okay, get the teapot with the hand. Okay, so I'm going to bring out my Vray window, and I'm going to rename this light, call this rectangle soffit. Okay, and that's really bright. So we're going to take the brightness down. So I'm going to make this 15, like our other light. Okay, I might adjust that later. I might come back and adjust that because I'm going to be adding some more lights to the scene. Okay, we'll stop the interactive render. Next thing I want to look at is, well, I want to look at one more rectangle light actually, because this one is probably the most important rectangle light in the scene. We have some glass. It's hard to see, but we have some glass on the right-hand side of this window or of this rendering. So we have some glass on the right-hand side, and I want to make it look like some ambient light is coming in, which is normal. So if you have windows, whether the sun is coming in or not, you're going to have some light coming in, bleeding into the space. So we're going to use a rectangle light for that light to bleed into the space. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to orbit out of here and select this roof and go to main menu, edit, hide. Okay, so we're going to try to put this light right in here. It's on an angle. So this is going to be a rectangle light again. So I'm going to click on rectangle, and I'm going to snap to that point. And there we go. It's one thing I think SketchUp is pretty good at, finding the axes of objects and drawing on those axes. So go ahead and click. So there's my rectangle light. If we go back to camera, and we're going to see that light when we click on the interactive render. We're going to see the actual source of the light. Now you see we're getting some light on this corbeau chair. This is rendering out really high resolution. I didn't realize I was doing it at such high resolution. The interactive render, that's okay, but if you were doing some production renders just to see what it looked like, you'd want to lower that resolution. So let's go ahead and lower that resolution. Let's go to the Vray window and go to settings and go to render output, and we'll change this to 800. Okay. And I'll turn on the interactive render. Alright, so we're getting some light. It's shining on the caboose, which was in the dark before. But we're seeing the light, so we want to turn off that light and we want to adjust its intensity. So we're going to go to our Vray window. We're going to go to settings. Actually, we'll go to lights. So we'll click on lights, change this rectangle light, rename it, and I'm going to call this rectangle sun. And I'll go down here under options and make it invisible. And I'm going to take down, 15 seems to be the magic number today. Take down the intensity of that. And you'll see some light spilling in on the floor. And if I was to see the ceiling a little bit without that soffit light, I would see that light also on the ceiling. Okay, so that's it for our rectangle lights. So now we're going to look at a sphere light, and we're going to use a sphere light to make some recessed can lighting in the ceiling. So some recessed lighting in the ceiling. And we have to do a little bit of modeling to put those recessed cans in. Okay, so I'm stopping the interactive render. You always want to stop that when you're going to go over and do some modeling. Okay, I'm going to isolate that ceiling, so I'm selecting that ceiling, and I'm going to use Shift-Control-I, and then I'm going to go to Main Menu, Edit, Hide. Now, this ceiling happens to be a component that is called floor roof. So if I go over to my components and I make sure it's in model, there's a floor roof component. So you see that here. So if I edit this roof, it's going to edit my floor. So I want to make this component unique by right-clicking on it, or by clicking on it to select it, and then right-clicking on it and choosing Make Unique. And you see over here now, it's a floor roof number 1. Okay, so let's look at this from the bottom actually. So we're going to go to Camera, Main Menu, Camera, Standard Views, Bottom. Okay, and I'm going to draw some circles in here that represent the recessed can lights. So I'm going to go ahead and C for circle, and I'm going to start to draw a circle anywhere, and I'm going to make sure the radius is 3 inches. So it's a total of 6 inches diameter. So there's my little circle, 3 inches. You don't want to make these too big. 6 inches is plenty big enough. So 3 inches. Alright, so I'm going to select that. I'm not sure if I like its position, but I'm going to select that. And actually what I haven't done, since I need to push-pull into this component, into this floor roof, I need to open that component, and this circle needs to be part of that component. It can't be separate, so I'm going to delete that. That's really important. So I want to double-click on the roof, and that opens up the component. So you get these dashed gray lines around it. And I'm going to go ahead and C for circle, and I'm going to draw that circle again with a radius of 3 inches. And I'm going to push-pull that circle 3 inches up. So I'm going to look at this. So I'm looking at it from the bottom right now. So I'm going to push-pull this actually 3 inches down into it. So I have to get in really close here. And I'm going to do this 3 inches. So now you see that I've put a pocket into that ceiling. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that pocket around, and it's going to automatically keep pocketing the ceiling. So I'll go back to Camera, Standard Views, Top. Camera, Standard Views, Bottom, so I can see it. and I'm going to select that circle, and I'm going to M for move and start to move it. Oh, I want to get just that circle. M for move and start to move it, and then press and release the control key, so that makes a copy of it. 5 feet, I'm typing on the keyboard. I'm going to click and start to move again, 5 feet on the keyboard. I'm going to make a window selection of these and click on M for move, start to move these. Press and release control on the keyboard, 5 feet, enter. Pick another point, start to drag it down, 5 feet, enter. Okay, so those are my recessed can lights. So let's look at this, make sure it, CR. Now I must have undid, I undid, I did the undo too far before I made the pockets. So that's why it's not making these all pockets, unfortunately. So I'm just going to have to go over these, push pull 3 inches, push pull, push pull 3 inches. This isn't the way I wanted to do it, but it's because I did one too many undos. You have to make sure you're over the light, not the ceiling. The light has to highlight. There we go. So this is the long way to do it, just so you know. It happens, right? Okay, a couple more and we're there. Oh, can't pull the ceiling down, doesn't like that. Okay, so good thing we checked it out. There we have all of our pockets. So I'm going to go back to camera, standard views, bottom, and we're going to close this component up by going to my select tool and just double clicking on that gray dashed rectangle. Okay, so that's closed up. I'm going to save that. That was a big move. I don't want to have to do that again. Now we're going to put in our sphere light. So I'm going to use a sphere light to go into those recessed cans. So I'm going to click on the sphere light. And I'm going to go in here and see if I can snap to the center. There, it found the center. So you just kind of move around the outside of the circle, the sphere light, until it snaps to the center. And then I'm going to snap to the end by clicking. So that's pretty important, is to get that sphere in there at the right size. So let's see what that looks like. Let's just do a interactive render. So there you see it. By default, you actually see the sphere. So if you wanted to see a sphere, like a light bulb, you could do that. In this case, I don't want to see this light bulb. I want that light bulb to be hidden up inside the recess. So I just need to open up my Vray window. Okay, and this is my sphere light. Now the goal is we're going to have 9 of these lights, and I don't want 9 separate sphere lights. I want one sphere light that controls all 9 of them. So that's important. One sphere light that controls all 9 of them. So I'm not going to go ahead and Control C and Control V, because that will make separate lights. I'm not going to click on the toolbar and make 9 lights like we just made the one, because that will make 9 lights. We're just going to move it with the Control key, and that's going to copy it. Okay, so before we do that, let's make it invisible. So I'm going to go down to Options, and I'm going to click on Invisible. And there you see that's invisible. So the position of that light was important, right at the bottom of the ceiling. That's right where you want it. The size of it is important. Right now it's 6. If it's above 6, you get this really funny light happening here. It doesn't light in the pocket, okay, because it's right at the bottom plane of the ceiling. So you want it to be 6 or even less, but I like it right at 6 because I get a good glow around the outside of that. Okay, so let's stop the interactive render and let's copy that light. So we'll go to camera. I wish there was a shortcut for this. Let's go to the top view or bottom view because we've been doing this quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select it. And the same way that we copied those circles around earlier, so M is move, and I'm going to press and release the control key and type in 5 feet. Pick a point. It remembers my press and release of the control key. It remembers that. So 5 feet. And then I'll make a selection of all of these. M for move. Go down, press and release the control key. 5 feet. Press and release, or no, just snap, just pick a point. And then 5 feet. And there we have all our lights. So I can see this with the interactive renderer. There we have all the lights lit up. So that's pretty good. That's nice. Alright, I want to move on to a spotlight. So I want to light that Corbeau chair by itself. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop the interactive render. I'm going to go to camera 1. That unhides all my objects. And we're going to light this Corbeau chair. But to really see this, it's very helpful to turn off lights so that you can see what you're actually lighting. Right now we have a lot of lights in the scene, so it's going to be hard to focus on that chair, but I want to focus on it. So I'm going to open up the asset editor, the Vray window, and I'm going to turn off these lights, and I have to do it one at a time. If anybody knows how to do it where I can just turn off all of these lights at once, let me know. I tried to do that and it was only turning the last one off. So I'm just clicking on these lights and I'm clicking on this little button here. Okay, so just turning off those lights. And I'm going to use my interactive renderer, the teapot with the hand. So pretty dark in there. And I'm going to focus on lighting the chaise lounge, the Corbeau chair there. Okay, so we're going to do this with a spotlight. So I'm going to stop the interactive render, and I'm going to do this by orbiting out of it. And I'll select my roof and go to Edit, Hide. Okay, so a little tricky with the spotlight. You just click. You click on it from the toolbar. So there's the spotlight button from the toolbar. You click on that button and then you just click in the scene. It's there, trust me. If I orbit, I should find that light. Should find it, I should say, right? So let's hide some things. Let's hide this. Alright, where are you at? There it is. It's hidden in there. So, yeah, it's in there. It's just buried in there. So I select that, and we're going to move that. So what does that look like in a top view? So if I go to Camera, Standard Views, Top, I'm just going to move it over the chair. And then if I go to Camera, Standard Views, say Front, I'm going to pick it up. Okay, I'm going to use the blue axis there so it picks it straight up. I'm going to go fairly high with that. Okay, and now we're going to look at some settings for that. So let's go back to our camera. And let's turn on the interactive renderer. So we're not seeing much of a difference. Vray is pretty good about the starting intensity of all these lights. We've been very lucky that the starting intensity shows us the light when we make it, because this can really throw someone off. I remember I worked in years for 3ds Max. I worked in that software forever, which I loved it. It's a great piece of rendering software. But when you make lights, it would set you up for failure, because you would make a light and it wouldn't show you any light. So that's what's happening right now. So we want to see the light. So let's go to our V-Ray window, and there's our spotlight. So it's set to 1000, and I don't see anything. Now I like to go to the extreme. I'm going to add a 0 to make this 10,000. Okay, so now I'm seeing a soft light on that Corbeau chair. We're getting a soft light on it from this spotlight, which is kind of nice. So if you're trying to make some soft lighting an area with furniture, spotlight is the way to go. So we can make this actually 20,000. Okay, and there is what's called a hot spot and a fall off. That's what I call it. V-Ray is calling it a cone angle and a umbra angle. The hot spot is the cone angle. So if I make this smaller, you see I'm just watching this window in the upper right. It's making that cone of light a little bit smaller, so it's in the rendering window, it's getting a little bit smaller, that cone, that hot spot. And then the fall off is the light falling off from light to dark. So if I increase that, I get more of a fall off. Okay, so now we see that light just focused on the Corbeau chair, some nice intimate lighting. Alright, so just saving. So the last type of light that we're going to look at is an object that you use as a light. And you do that by making an emissive material on the object. So we need an object to spread some light. So let's stop the interactive render. And I'm going to go in and model this. So I'm going to do this with a rectangle. So I'm going to type in R for rectangle. And oops. Let's go back to my selection tool. R for rectangle. I'm going to draw a little rectangle. And I'm going to use P for push-pull. I'm going to pull that up. Something like that. Okay, so there's my object, my box, and I want this to be a glowing box. I need to make a component out of it, so that's really important. I'm going to make a window out, selection of it, press G on the keyboard, and call this glowing box. Okay, so this I'm going to do in my material editor. So I'm going to go to my V-Ray window, and I'm going to go to materials, left clicking on the sphere here with the checkers, and then right clicking on that same sphere and choosing emissive. So there's my emissive material, and by default the color is white and the intensity is 1. So let's look at that. Let's bring up the interactive renderer. Okay, we haven't assigned the material yet to the object, so we're not seeing anything. That's just what it looks like with the default material. So the object is selected. So I'm going to right click on emissive and choose apply to selection. There we go, a nice, like right off the bat, by default, a nice glowing box. So V-Ray for SketchUp is setting us up for success in this case. Just they need to work on that spotlight intensity a little bit. Okay, now once we turn on the lights, this emissive lighting and the intimate lighting over the chair will kind of fade away, kind of go to the back because there's too much lighting in the scene. So something to think about, maybe not over lighting the scene. I'm just trying to show us several different lighting options at once. So let's look at changing the color of this. And I'm going to increase the intensity to get that to really glow. And I'm going to give it a little bit of transparency. As you can, so it's like an acrylic box that you can see through. Okay, so let's turn back on all our lights. So I'm going to stop the interactive render. and go to the V-Ray window. I don't know why I closed it, but go to lights and click these on. So always name your lights. Good idea to name them if you're going to have more than one. If I was to have more than one sphere light, I would name it. If I was to have more than one spotlight, I would name it. Typically I don't have more than one sun. Okay, so I'll just teapot with the hand, do an interactive render. So the corbeau chair is nicely lit up, so you can see the detail on it. So the spotlight helped with that. Ideally you'd go to 3D Warehouse and you'd get a floor lamp, and then you'd put that spotlight right below the floor lamp to make it look realistic. So I'm going to go back to what we looked at in the beginning, was exposure value. And I'm just going to take that exposure value down just a little bit. And then I might have to brighten, like, say, the Soffit light if I do that, but let's see what happens. So let's go to settings, and let's go to camera. And so it's 12 right now. So I'm going to go to 12.5, not much. Because that went a long way to darken that. So that looks pretty good. You'll see 13 will be too dark. So I'm going to work at 12.5. So 0.5 goes a long way. Okay, I think I'll keep the lighting where it's at. Alright, so now it's just a matter of stopping this interactive render and rendering this out at a higher resolution. So for now, I'm going to render this out at 1920 by 1080. Okay, that's high definition. And so and that's not going to be the teapot with the hand, that's just going to be the regular teapot. So it's going to take a little bit to render out. I like to tell my students that if it takes less than an hour, that's good. If it takes more than an hour, you have to go in and change something. I don't know why that window popped up. So if it takes more than an hour, you have to change something. These shouldn't take anywhere near an hour. Let me maximize that. Is it still rendering? That's the thing. When that log window came up. This is doing an interactive render right now, I think. No, it's still rendering. You just need to be patient. It's not the teapot with the hand. Alright, so that's still going. Another thing that is on is the denoiser is turned on. So that we looked at in the last video, but if you're just joining us for this video, I'll as soon as this rendering finishes, I'll take a look at the denoiser. We'll take a look back at that. So some basic lighting techniques for V-Ray. The next video that I make in this series, so this is a little bit of a series, it's V-Ray for SketchUp. We looked at the basics of V-Ray. Now we're looking at lighting for V-Ray, and the next video is going to be materials for V-Ray. Alright, so it says it's still rendering. So I think I can take a look at where that denoiser is while this is rendering. So that's right here under settings, and you'll find denoiser, and that's been turned on. And that happens at the very end. Alright, so if you found this video helpful, go ahead. My head is going to pop up in the upper left. And go ahead and click on that if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And I'll put some videos in the upper right. Alright, I'll see you on the next one.